This is 4.5 test review numbers 9 and 10. So for here we need to factor the numerator. The denominator we don't need to worry about. It's not factorable. So for the numerator we will get x minus 4 times x minus 2. So when we find the x-intercepts, we set the numerator factors equal to 0. We will get x equals 4. And with x minus 2 equals 0, we get x equals 2. So positive 4 and positive 2. For our y-intercept, we plug in the values of 0. We will get 0 minus 0 plus 8 over 0. That means we have y equals 8 over 0, which is undefined. So we do not have any y-intercepts. For our vertical asymptote, we look at the denominator. So we set negative 4x equal to 0, and we get x equals 0. For our horizontal asymptote, we look at the degree, 2 over 1. Well, n, 2, is greater than m, which is 1. That means there are no horizontal asymptotes, but because 2 is greater than 1 by 1, we have a slant asymptote. And so what you need to do for slant asymptote is divide. So negative 4x, the denominator, divides into the numerator, which was x squared minus 6x plus 8. Okay, so what do you multiply times 4x to get x squared? Well, if you don't know, take x squared and divide by negative 4x and simplify this fraction. X squared over x cancels to x over 1. So I get x over the negative 4. The negative 4 doesn't change, only the x cancels. Okay, so the x cancels with one of the x's on the numerator to leave you with x over negative 1 or 4. And so I have negative 1/4 times x. So that's what we get with that. X over negative 4 is negative 1/4 because there's 1x, 1 over x over the negative 4. So negative 1/4. So negative 1/4 x. I multiply that over, I will get x squared. There's nothing, there's not another term here to multiply. There's nothing to go under the 6x. I get 0. Bring down the negative 6x and do this same thing over here. So negative 6x over negative 4x. You're always doing the number in over here divided by the number out here. Negative over negative is positive. The x's cancel. 6 over 4 is 3 over 2. So positive 3/2. When I multiply that, I will get my negative 6x. I get 0. Bring down the 8. Negative 4x is not going to go into 8. There are no variables there. This is my remainder. Nothing that I need. I need that expression right there. And that becomes y equals negative 1/4 x plus 3/2. It's the equation of a line. Okay, so that is my slant asymptote. SA, slant asymptote. So to graph that, I have to go to positive 3/2. My y-intercept of the asymptote, not of my graphing here. The y-intercept of the asymptote is 3/2, which is 1 and 1/2. So I'm going to plot that point only for the purposes of my asymptote. Now to apply the slope of negative 1/4, I'm going to go up 4, or I'm sorry, up 1. So I go from 1.5 to 2.5. No, I'm sorry, I'm going to go down 1. It's a negative 1. I'm going to go down from 1.5 to 1/2, and then over 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm right here at that half value. And if I do that again, I go down to negative 1/2 and over 4, and I end up right here. Okay, if I do go up 1 unit, I'm going to go to the left 4 units. Okay, up 1 and left 4. So that is going downhill, that asymptote, because it is a negative number. When I graph this, I'm going to graph this kind of narrow here. So I'm going to be going from here to there, and there's my slant asymptote. Okay, my vertical asymptote was y equals 0. I'm going to make that line a little bit thicker. Well, I don't need to. I think we'll still see it. Yeah, barely. Okay, my vertical asymptote was at x equals 0. So let's go ahead and make that a little bit thicker. Okay, and maybe I can make this one thicker as well. Apparently I didn't have it selected. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you can see our 2 points here are underneath this slant asymptote on the right hand side of the vertical. I don't have any points on the left. So when I'm going to do my graphing and my testing, I will need to come up with a point over here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's choose, I don't know, like -4, -5. Okay. If I plug in -4, that's going to give me -4 squared minus 6 times -4 plus 8 over -4 times -4. So 16 minus 24 is -8 plus 8 is 0 over 16. So 0 over 16 is 0. So -4, no, what happened here? -4 squared, 16, oh, plus 24. 16 plus 24 is 48. So 48 over 16 is 3. Okay, so -4, 3, right there. Okay, now I'm going to erase this just because I'll leave there for a minute. But I'm going to erase it because I need to graph. I'll probably be graphing up here. So let me test my values. My vertical asymptote is at 0. So when I add and subtract 0.1, I'm going to get -0.1 and positive 0.1 for my testing. Okay, when I plug in -0.1 minus 4, that's a negative number. -0.1 minus 2 is a negative number. -4 times -0.1 is a positive, so that is a positive value. So I was correct. I'm going to be going up on the left. For 0.1 minus 4, I get a negative. 0.1 minus 2 is a negative. -4 times 0.1 is a negative. 3 negatives is a negative answer. So I will be going down to negative infinity. Okay? Now I'm going to clean this up just so I can have a nice clean graph. Okay? So when I go down here, I'm going to kind of come down into that corner and then round up and follow the slant asymptote, much like I did with the horizontal asymptotes. Okay? There we go. Oh, cheat. There. Okay. So my graph goes down and curves up toward and follows the slant asymptote. Now this one, I need to come up actually above and then go through the 4 and then follow the slant asymptote. So I'm going to come up, go through the 2, go above the x-axis there, down, and then follow the slant asymptote. So that's my graph for number 9. Okay, so now let's look at number 10. I will factor this. I will get x times x squared minus 1, which still can be factored, x squared minus 1. Down here, I'm going to factor out a 3. When I factor out 3, I get x squared plus 2x plus 3. Okay, x squared minus 1 is x plus 1 and x minus 1. So x plus 1 and x minus 1. And I will cross this out. And x squared plus 2x plus 3 is x minus 3. This should be minus 3. So x minus plus 3 and x minus 1. Okay, so that cancels that out because I rewrote it as factors. So now what I need to see is I have x minus 1 in the numerator and the denominator. So that's going to cancel out because it's a common factor. So ultimately, I have x times x plus 1 over 3 times x plus 3. Okay? X minus 1 cancels. I'm going to clean this up over here, give myself room to do some work. And my x-intercepts, I set the numerator factors equal to 0, so I'm looking right here at my factors. So x equals 0, and x plus 1 equals 0, which gives me x equal to negative 1. So my x-intercepts are 0 and negative 1. For my y-intercept, I plug in the value of 0. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the original function for this, just because it's much easier for because I get 0 minus 0 over 0 plus 0 minus 9. That's 0 over negative 9, which is 0. So my y-intercept is 0. For my vertical asymptotes, I am plugging in or setting the denominator factors. I don't need to worry about the 3, just the variable expressions. So x plus 3 equals 0. I get x equals negative 3. For the horizontal asymptote, my value of n is greater than the value of m. So n is greater than m. No horizontal asymptotes. So that means I have, and because it's only one value higher, I have to do slant asymptote. So I'm going to go down here and divide. So I get 3x squared plus 6x minus 9. Divide that into x cubed. I'm missing the squared term, so I need to put 0x squared minus x, and I'm missing a constant, so I need to put a 0 for the constant. So much like the one over here, I have x cubed, and I have 3x squared. So I'm going to need a fraction up here. So x cubed over 3x squared. These two x's cancel out with 2 of them up here. I am left with x over 3, which is 1/3 x. When I distribute that, I will get x cubed. 6 times 1/3 is 2x squared. Negative 9 times 1/3 is negative 3x. So now I am subtracting straight down. That's a 0. 0 minus 2 is negative 2x squared. Negative x minus negative 3 is adding the 3, so I get positive 2x. Bring down the 0. 3 into negative 2, so I'm going to go ahead and do negative 2x squared and divide by 3x squared. The x squareds get canceled. I'm left with negative 2/3. So negative 2/3. When I multiply, I get negative 2x squared. Negative 2/3 times 6 is negative 4x. Negative 2/3 times negative 9 is positive 3. I subtract, I get 0. 2x minus negative 4x is positive 6x. And, oh yeah, 2/3 of 3, 9 is 6, not 3. So 0 minus negative 6 is positive 6 down here. It honestly, in this particular area, it didn't matter because this is our remainder and is unnecessary. We are looking at the expression up there for our equation. So y equals 1/3 x minus 2/3. And when I graph that, my y-intercept is negative 2/3. So negative 2/3 is right about here. Okay. When I go rise over run, 1 over 3, that's both positive. So up 1 to, a third up there. And then to the right by 3 units. Up to a third and over 3 units. Well, 1 and 1/3. And then down, sorry. All right. So negative 2/3. That was 1/3. All right. For some reason, I got looking at that. I thought it was in the wrong spot. So go down 1 to negative 1 and 2/3 over 3. Down 1 to negative 2 and 2/3 over 3. I am ready to draw my vertical asymptote. It's going to be right there. That looks pretty good. That's not my vertical asymptote, my slant asymptote. My vertical asymptote is at negative 3, so I will draw that down. Let's see, what else do we have? We have an x-intercept at negative 1 and at 0. Our y-intercept is at 0. We got our asymptotes. Okay. Now, for my testing of behavior of the graph, I will test to the left of negative 3, so negative 3.1, to the right of negative 3, which is negative 2.9. I'm using the factored form here, so negative 3.1 in for x is a negative number. Negative 3.1 plus 1 is a negative number. The 3 is positive. Negative 3.1 plus 3 is a negative. 3 negatives is a negative value. When I plug in negative 2.9 for x, that's a negative number. Negative 2.9 plus 1 is a negative number. The 3 is positive. And negative 2.9 plus 3 is a positive. So I'm left with 2 negatives, which is a positive outcome. So at negative 3.1, I'm at going towards negative infinity. At negative 2.9, I'm going towards positive infinity. When I go to graph this, I have no points down here to guide me at all. So let's plug in negative 6. I'm actually going to go to the factored form here. So negative 6 times negative 6 plus 1, which is negative 5, over 3 times negative 6 plus 3 is negative 3. So that's 30 over negative 9, which is negative 3 and 1/3. So at negative 6, I'm at negative 3 and 1/3. So right here. Okay, so I'm going to be coming up here into that corner and then following the slant asymptote. Here I'm going to be going down through the first point below the x-axis and then through the 0 and then follow. So down through that 0 and then back up through that one and then following the slant asymptote. And there is number 9 and 10. And we're done.